Okay, and you may be asking after our last video where we posted the functioning meal scan and the functioning gauges that show sort of where each nutrient is for that meal in terms of daily value, how we got that working. And essentially, most of the time, it's a conversation with Gemini or Claude. I would say probably the foundational element is making sure that the prompt that we want to send is establishing the context that we think that it is. And so this is a baby version of the prompt. It doesn't have anywhere near the level of detail as our real prompt. And I don't, want to or need to share the real prompt since we're actually launching this app. But these are some elements of it that you might have guessed are there. You have to rate the following nutrients on a scale of 1 to 9. Compensate internally for the fact that you don't do 2D photos that well, and give it back to me in a JSON response. Right, that's pretty straightforward. But what I asked is a verifying question. If you go back to our different prompt types, verification is one of them. Are you basing the 1 to 9 ranking on a per meal goal or for each nutrient? So are you basing this on what a meal should be? And in this scenario, the ranking will be based on the nutrient density and contribute the response from Gemini. Is that in this scenario, the ranking would be based on the nutrient density and contribution of that specific meal towards daily recommended dietary allowance or the daily value for the child. So the good news is Gemini did not fall for the trap, right? I set up a trap here. I said, are you basing this on a per meal goal for each nutrient? Are you basically, we can back up our daily values for each of these nutrients because those are based on, real scientific clinical fact. But I wanted to ask if Gemini was hallucinating a meal goal or an idea of what a meal should have. And so I asked, are you basing this 1 to 9 ranking on just what you think the meal should have? And I did not prompt it to say anything about daily value or daily anything. It came back and said, I am basing it on daily recommended dietary allowance for a child rather than an isolated per meal goal. So our prompt is getting the response from Gemini that we want. Here is how a nutritional neuroscientist would calibrate those 1 to 9 scores. And that's why this context, you're a pediatric nutritional neuroscientist, really matters because it makes Gemini say, I have to evaluate this the way that this qualifying person or this role that you're asking me to step into would evaluate it. A few other things. Bioavailability is something we're going to cover later, but it gives us sort of a standard for the scoring that is not different at all from the one that we place in our prompt. And then I go into, okay, so as far as our nutrient gauges and the color calibration that we should use, maybe 1 to 2 should be red, 3 should be yellow, because now you got to think. I've already established the context of the nutritional neuroscientist. So we're still kind of getting responses from Gemini in the frame of a nutritional neuroscientist as it understands it. So 1 to 2 would be red, 3 should be yellow, 4 to 5 should be green, 6 to 9 should be glowing green. That color coding logic, according to Gemini, this is the Gemini response. That color coding logic perfectly aligns with a nutrient density UX. By mapping 1 to 9 scores to these specific colors, you're creating a clear visual hierarchy. We didn't get anything about what a nutritional neuroscientist would do there or whether or not that makes sense, but it's not in conflict. So we probably need to do a little bit more verification on that element. Are we really being accurate? But I think we're in a safe place to say that we've advanced the discussion. And then so for the implementation strategy, it's starting to give me coding concepts that I can apply either to my scan coordination function or in my UI that are going to help me do this. So the next thing I asked is how could I enhance this prompt to emphasize that the rating is based on nutritional goal for one meal? How would that change the brain fuel visual map? And so this was sort of brainstorming that I went through where it says, let's see, to make the AI focus strictly on the per meal goal, you should define what 100% successful meal looks like. And I don't want to get too much into the weeds with that because it's essentially what I did. That's how I ended up calibrating our per meal page to show actually to on like a 60% scale, right? Like a 60% scale is actually 100% per meal based on the way that I'm doing it. It's a casual or sort of a blanket concept, but it's basically suggesting to the parent you're not losing if this meal is at 50%. You should feel very good about that because for a meal that's very good. Our day gauges function completely differently, but this is the way that I work with Gemini in exchanging ideas. Some of this gets very code heavy. This is a very code light exchange. But just exchanging ideas based on its understanding of what our subject matter experts would say, what they've said on the internet, and either supporting ideas or having it introduce new ideas. So hopefully that's a good sort of 30,000 foot about how I started to hone the prompt. We're not going to get into everything that's in the prompt, but we will cover just some of the basic concepts of working with LLMs to sharpen the tools we're using.